The storm had been raging for 3 days when the supply boat finally reached Blackstone Lighthouse on that cold October morning in 2019, and what they found inside would haunt them forever. But you won't believe what was written in the journal, because Thomas Webb, the 47-year-old lighthouse keeper who had requested this isolated posting 8 years ago as punishment for a drunk driving accident that killed a young woman named Sarah, was lying dead at the base of the tower with his neck broken from a fall. But here's where it gets absolutely terrifying. His journal was sitting open on his desk with entries dated 3 days after his death, and the most chilling part was yet to come, written in his unmistakable handwriting describing how he'd fallen on October 19th during the storm and died instantly, yet somehow remained conscious as a ghost for 3 more days. But what he discovered during those 3 days would shock even the most skeptical investigators, experiencing the island's strange mercy as he heard the tapping sounds. 333, pause, 333. Echoing through the lighthouse walls, and when you hear what those taps meant you'll get chills, because he saw wet footprints appearing on stairs he knew he was alone on, discovered photographs in his darkroom showing something that shouldn't exist, a figure that looked exactly like him standing at the edges of every frame getting closer with each image. And the most bone-chilling moment came when he looked down from the lamproom and saw himself standing on the rocks below while simultaneously being inside the tower. But that wasn't even the strangest part, which was when he finally understood that Blackstone Island had given him 3 extra days after death, though nobody could have predicted what he would do with that time. 3 days he didn't deserve but desperately needed to finish the letter he'd been trying to write for 8 years to Sarah's parents, explaining what happened that night on the bridge and begging for forgiveness, and what happened next will restore your faith in humanity. A letter the investigators found in his desk drawer dated October 22nd, 3 days after his confirmed death, that brought closure to Margaret and Robert Chen, who had spent nearly a decade wondering why Thomas had disappeared into isolation. But the real miracle was still ahead. And when they received the letter they cried, and then Robert did something unexpected by writing back to the dead man's address saying, "We forgive you. Sarah would have wanted you to forgive yourself." And even though the letters were returned as undeliverable every year on the anniversary of Sarah's death, what happened in 2023 defied every law of nature, because Margaret received a response in Thomas's handwriting postmarked from Blackstone Island on October 22nd saying, "Thank you, I found peace. The light is still burning," which should have been impossible because Thomas had been dead for 4 years and no one had visited the automated lighthouse, and the postal service had no record of processing any mail from the island. But wait until you hear what the authorities discovered next. The letter was real and physical and sitting in Margaret's hands. Yet here's the part that will make your blood run cold. When they searched Thomas's lighthouse they found not just 1 journal but 13, and what was written in the 13th journal has never been explained, with 12 being routine keeper's logs from his 8 years of service and the 13th being an ancient journal with yellowed brittle pages containing entries from different lighthouse keepers spanning centuries, all describing the same experience of dying in the lighthouse and being given 3 extra days by the island's mercy. But the most terrifying detail was hiding in plain sight. Each section written in different handwriting from different eras, including entries from the 1800s and one from 1952, and this journal was supposed to be locked in a classified vault in Washington, D.C. after the Coast Guard seized it. But what happened in 2024 changed everything. When Thomas's younger brother Marcus, who had joined the Coast Guard specifically to understand what happened, visited the lighthouse for emergency storm repairs, he found the journal sitting on the keeper's desk open to blank pages waiting for the next person who would die there. And what he saw on those pages made him request an immediate transfer. Terrified, he called Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a folklore professor specializing in liminal spaces between life and death, who spent 1 night in the lighthouse, and what she experienced that night left her shaking, emerging the next morning pale and trembling, writing in her sealed classified report that Blackstone Lighthouse exists in 2 states simultaneously. But her conclusion was even more disturbing. The living lighthouse that's automated and functional, and the dying lighthouse where those who pass within its walls are given time to finish what they couldn't finish in life. And here's where it gets really strange. Thomas Webb's spirit doesn't haunt the lighthouse. The lighthouse protects Thomas Webb's spirit and every keeper who came before him. They're all still there, keeping the light and finding the peace they couldn't find elsewhere. But the most shocking revelation was in her final sentence. The island isn't haunted. The island is merciful. God help the next person who dies there, because the journal has pages left and the lighthouse is patient. and the forensic investigation confirmed something that should be scientifically impossible, through blood patterns and decomposition, that Thomas had died exactly when he claimed in his journal on October 19th, making the subsequent 3 days of entries physically impossible. Yet here's what made veteran investigators question everything they knew. Handwriting analysis proved beyond doubt that every word was genuinely written by Thomas Webb, with consistent pressure and stroke patterns showing no signs of forgery or predating, and the photographs found in his darkroom were time-stamped October 21st, 2 days after his death, showing the lighthouse from angles that required someone to physically be standing on the rocks holding a camera, but the evidence kept getting more unexplainable. Plus, the radio had mysteriously stopped working on October 18th with no mechanical explanation, despite Thomas being an experienced keeper who knew how to repair equipment, cutting him off from the mainland completely. And witnesses later reported something that still gives them nightmares. That he'd seen a supply boat circling the lighthouse on October 22nd, and when he looked through binoculars, the pilot had his own face, which was when he understood he was watching the real supply boat that would come to collect his body. And in his final journal entry written at 11:47 p.m. on October 22nd, he explained something that will change how you think about death. "I understand now, the tapping, 333 means 3 days. I've been dead for 3 days ever since the fall. The rest was the island giving me time to finish the letter to Sarah's parents, time to make peace." But what he wrote next brought investigators to tears. "The supply boat I saw today was real, but it wasn't coming for me, it was coming for my body. I'm writing this knowing that when you read it I'll be gone. The island isn't cruel, it gave me 3 extra days I didn't deserve but desperately needed." And his final words were the most haunting. "I can see myself now at the bottom of the stairs where I fell, the real version, the dead one, and I'm going to join that version now." And when Dr. Torres, the forensic psychologist, tried to explain it rationally by suggesting Thomas had written everything before his death and backdated it in a final psychological break, she encountered evidence that shattered her entire worldview. She couldn't account for the photographs or the letters' impact on the Chen family, or the fact that the ancient journal contained the same pattern from other keepers across 2 centuries, and Father Martinez, who had known Thomas before his isolation, suggested something that still resonates today, that some souls need time to let go. Maybe Thomas was one of them. Maybe the lighthouse in its mercy gave him that time. And today Blackstone Lighthouse operates automatically with no human keeper stationed there. But what sailors report seeing will make you question reality. A figure in the lamp room on foggy nights. A man in an old-fashioned keeper's uniform tending to a light that needs no tending. And when technicians installed new automated systems in 2022, they experienced the same phenomena that drove Thomas to document everything. They heard the tapping. 333, pause, 333, and found wet footprints on stairs no one had walked on. And every photograph from the new remote monitoring cameras showed the same thing that appears in Thomas's photos. A figure at the edge of the frame, always slightly out of focus, wearing a keeper's uniform that looked exactly like Thomas Webb. And the Coast Guard has stopped investigating these reports for a reason that should terrify you. Because some truths are too strange for official reports, and some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. And somewhere in that locked vault in Washington, D.C., the ancient journal waits, with pages still slowly filling across the decades and centuries. But what will be written on the final page is something nobody wants to discover. One day, to contain the final entry that explains everything. But that day hasn't come yet, because the light still burns every night, warning ships away from the treacherous rocks. The keeper still watches over the waters with eyes that have seen beyond death. And Blackstone Island keeps its mercy for those who need it most, offering 3 days at a time to souls who died with unfinished business. But here's what nobody tells you about those 3 days. 3 days to write the letters that need writing. 3 days to seek the forgiveness that needs seeking. 3 days to find in death the peace that couldn't be found in life. And Thomas Webb used his 3 days in a way that proves something extraordinary about the human spirit, to heal an 8-year wound in a family's heart, proving that sometimes the dead care more about the living than the living realize, that sometimes places exist outside the normal rules where death doesn't work the way it does elsewhere. And the implications of this are absolutely staggering, where duty transcends mortality, where forgiveness can reach across the barrier between worlds, where a lighthouse keeper can finish his watch even after his heart stops beating. But the most important question remains unanswered, because the light must always burn, the ships must always be warned, and some souls need just a little more time before they can finally, truly, completely let go. And if you're wondering whether this could happen to you, the answer might surprise you, because Blackstone Island is still there, the lighthouse still stands, the journal still has blank pages, and somewhere out there, someone else might need those 3 days, those 3 precious days between death and whatever comes next. Those 3 days that the island grants to those who died with words left unspoken, with letters left unwritten, with forgiveness left unsought. And the terrifying beauty of it all is that Thomas Webb proved that love, duty, and redemption can transcend even death itself, that a man can die and still fulfill his purpose, that the end of life doesn't mean the end of caring, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe shows mercy to those who need it most, even if that mercy comes in the form of 3 days as a ghost in a lonely lighthouse, 3 days to make peace with the past, 3 days to say the words that should have been said years ago, 3 days that changed 2 families forever and proved that some stories never truly end, they just transform into something beyond our understanding, something that lives in the space between the living and the dead, in the rotation of a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog, in the sound of waves crashing against rocks that have witnessed centuries of mercy, and in the journal that waits with blank pages for the next soul who will need what Thomas Webb received. 3 final days to finish what was left unfinished. 3 final days to become more than just another tragedy. 3 final days to prove that even in death, love finds a way.